Hi guys, I wanted to record this quick video with my 6 tips on how to approach a law exam. So tip number 1 is to read the question and the instructions really carefully. This is not because we're trying to trip you up, we're not, but it's to make sure that you are answering the question you've been asked. So only answer the question you've been asked. Don't go off on a tangent about all the other aspects of the law if you're not asked about that. It's also so you know whose position it is that you are representing. Right? So often in a law question, you will be asked to advise one particular side of a dispute. So you want to make sure that you are getting that right and you're looking at the right issues in relation to the right person. The advantage of a take-home or online exam like you guys have is that you're not going to be rushed through perusal. So take your time to read through the question carefully and make sure you really understand it before you start to try to answer it. Alright, tip number 2 is to be really methodical in your answer. Use the structure that I've given you for each area of the law in the week-to-week workshops, but also in the review lecture of the content. Use those structures to work through the problem questions. Don't jump ahead, even if the ultimate answer might seem obvious to you. It's kind of like a math question. You want to show us you're working. So make sure you're working through each element in a really logical and methodical way. Sorry. Okay, it's being really noisy. And yeah, that's being logical and methodical is really what the law is about. For me personally, I come from a creative arts background and I think of the law as my equivalent of maths or science. I'm not very good at maths or science, but the law is where I use that really practical, logical side of my brain. So yeah, just go through it step by step. Number 3, and this is probably the most important tip, is to make sure you're applying the law to the facts of the question. Especially for an online exam that you're doing at home and for an open book exam, we don't need you to regurgitate all the law back to us because you could just be copying that from your notes. It's not really showing us that you're understanding what you've been taught. So remember that what you're showing us is that you understand the law and you know how to apply it in a real world practical situation. And you do that by applying it to the question, not just telling us what the law is. And this is very similar to what we've been doing in class week to week, right? Week to week we have problem questions and we look at how the law would apply in that particular problem question. You'll be doing the exact same thing in the exam, except that all the different areas of law will be contained in that problem question. Don't stress too much about that because I will ask you a series of questions in the exam paper that will direct you towards what law to look at, so that will help provide guidance. But when you are applying the law, make sure you're really applying it. So I recommend doing this by referring as much as possible to the facts that are contained in the problem question. Use the character and parties' names when you talk about them, and draw in the information that you've given in the scenario when you're applying the law. Alright, tip number 4 is to spend your time on the contentious issues. Right, you have a word limit and you have a 24-hour time frame, and you're not going to be able to discuss everything about all of the law that we've learned this semester in your word limit. So what you need to do is to decide where you're spending your time and your words. So when you read the question at the beginning, you want to be identifying what are the contentious issues here. And spend your time on that. Don't waste time on issues that are obvious. So for example, if you have a copyright question and it's really obvious that copyright subsists, and it's really obvious that there's been an infringement, but the question is clearly trying to raise an issue of whether there is a defense, then that's obviously where you want to spend your time and your words. Go through it methodically. Say there's copyright here and copyright has been infringed in this way, right? Don't skip steps, but don't go through it in painstaking detail that you waste all your words before you get to the contentious issue. Alright, step number 5 is to make sure you conclude whatever question you are answering. Now, I've said a few times throughout the semester that there's not always a clear right or wrong, black or white answer to law questions, and that is true, right? So often, if you're not sure which way the law is going to go, then that probably means it could go either way, and you just have to apply it and make an argument in the way that you think is the most common sense way for this to come out. But just because it could go either way doesn't mean that you shouldn't make a decision. You should make a decision. You should apply the law in the way that you think is the most logical way. You might want to say, this is a little bit contentious, or we probably need some more information here to reach a definitive conclusion. But on the facts, it looks like the best answer is X because of this. And this means, and then conclude. So has there been defamation? Has there been a copyright infringement? Make sure you're sort of rounding off your answer. And my final tip, tip number 6, is don't write an essay. This exam is a problem question exam. And even though you have 24 hours to do it and you can do it at home, we're not expecting you to do this differently than you would a normal exam. You can complete it in a shorter time frame. You don't need references in your answer. You can use bullet points if it makes sense, and you don't need to write in full paragraphs. You should write in full sentences where you can. I mean, obviously, your priority should be clarity, because you want your marker to understand what you've written, but you don't have to write in a narrative style or in paragraphs or anything. Just like get through the question and deliver your answer in a really clear, really direct way. And if that means bullet points, then that's totally fine. So those are my 6 tips for approaching a law exam. The main one is to make sure you are applying the law to the facts. And good luck in your exam.